Here is something that is going to annoy about half the people watching this. The English they speak in America might actually be closer to the original than the English they speak in England. I am not joking. This is not one of those clickbait things. The accent the British use today is the one that changed. The Americans kept the older version. And look, before anyone closes this in a rage, if you are the kind of person who enjoys having something you were sure about turned completely upside down, go ahead and subscribe. Because honestly, this channel does this to you on a regular basis, right? Let me show you where it all went sideways. So picture London in the early 1600s. Shakespeare's alive. He is writing. The first ships are leaving for the New World. The streets are loud and crowded and filthy and completely alive. And here's the bit that nobody ever tells you. If you could somehow stand on a street corner in that London and just listen to ordinary people talking, the accent would not sound posh. It would not sound like the king. It would not sound like anything you would ever call proper English today. It would sound, and this is the strange part, a little bit American, a little bit Irish, a little bit like a West Country pirate. Rough, rolling, full of hard sounds, because that is honestly how English sounded back then. And the people who climbed onto those ships carried that exact sound with them all the way across the Atlantic. And then they stayed there, cut off mostly, thousands of miles of open ocean between them and home. A letter took months to arrive. Most people never made the journey back even once in their entire lives. So just think about what that does to the way people talk. Back in England, the language kept moving. It kept shifting. It kept picking up new habits and new fashions, decade after decade after decade. But the colonists were not in the room for any of that. They drifted in their own direction, sure, of course they did, but they also held on. They held on to old things, old sounds and old words that England itself would eventually get bored of and toss out. So let me tell you about the biggest one, the clearest clue of the whole lot, the letter R. Say the word car out loud. Go on, actually do it. If you are American or Canadian or Irish or Scottish, you land on that R at the end. You can feel it in your mouth. But if you are from most of England, you do not. You say ka. The R just quietly vanishes into nothing. And here is the thing that genuinely breaks people when they hear it. That dropped R is the new thing. That is the modern invention. That is the change. For most of the history of the English language, everybody pronounced that R at the end of a word. The colonists did, Shakespeare did, the ordinary people walking around England did, right up until somewhere around the late 1700s. And then something shifted, and it shifted in England specifically. Around the time of the Industrial Revolution, a new way of speaking started spreading among the upper classes in and around London. And a lot of it, honestly, came down to status. It was about sounding refined, sounding like you had money, sounding like you were not a laborer or a farmer or somebody who worked with their hands for a living. And one of the things this fancy new way of talking did was soften that hard R at the end of words. Ka instead of car, wata instead of water. It sounded smoother, gentler, more elegant, more expensive. It sounded like you had never done a hard day of work in your life, and to that particular crowd, that was the entire point. And because London was the center of everything, the money, the court, the power, the newspapers, the schools, all of it, that accent became the one everybody wanted to copy. It trickled down from the top. It got drummed into the children at the expensive boarding schools. And 100 years later, it would become the voice of the BBC, broadcast out across the entire world. So in everybody's mind, it became the sound of a British accent, the proper one, the default. But peel all of that away, and what was it really? It was a fashion, a trend that caught on in one corner of England and slowly spread outward from there. And the crucial part, the part that changes everything, is that it never made it across the ocean in time. America had already gone. America had already sailed. America kept the R-A-R. So when an American gently teases a British person for saying ka, and that British person feels that little warm flush of superiority, that quiet little well, this is simply the correct way to say it, they have got the whole thing backwards, completely backwards. The American is the one holding on to how English used to sound. The British accent is the remix. It is the cover version that somehow ended up more famous than the original song. Now hang on, because if you think this is all about one little letter, you are going to love where this goes next. Because it is not just the R. Let me give you a single word that really drives this home and honestly twists the knife a bit. fall, as in the season. The leaves go orange and red, they fall off the trees, the air turns cold. Americans call it fall, and just about every British person, at some point in their life, has heard that and thought, oh, that is such an American word. Why can they not just say autumn like a normal civilized human being? It feels modern. It feels like something the Americans cooked up just to be different. Except here's the truth. Fall is English, deeply, properly, originally English. People used it all over England for centuries. They talked about the fall of the leaf as the actual name for the season. It turns up in Old English writing. It turns up in Old English poetry. It is about as English as a word can possibly get. The colonists took it with them, the same way they took everything else. And then, back home in England, this other word, autumn, which had drifted in from French and Latin, slowly became the more fashionable choice. And it shoved fall right out of the way. So England switched over to autumn. America just carried on with fall. And there it is again. The so-called American word turns out to be the older, more traditional, more English one. And England is the one that quietly changed lanes and then forgot it ever happened. You want another one? Because there are loads of them. Take the word gotten. Americans say, I have gotten used to it. And British people will queue up around the block to tell you that is wrong. That it is lazy. That it is clumsy. That it is some horrible little Americanism crawling into the language and ruining it from the inside. It is not. Gotten is Old English. It is genuinely ancient. Chaucer's world used it. It is a perfectly proper, perfectly respectable old form of the word get. America held on to it for hundreds of years. And England, at some point along the way, quietly dropped it and switched to just got. So every single time somebody turns their nose up at gotten as some ugly modern American thing, what they are actually turning their nose up at is a little fossil of older English, a genuine piece of their own history that Britain let slip through its fingers and America kept safe. And honestly, I could keep going for a while. The way Americans say certain vowels, certain spellings they use, certain phrases that sound completely American but show up sitting right there in Old English documents. It is the same story every single time. The thing people assume America ruined or dumbed down or invented purely to be irritating turns out, over and over, to be the thing America quietly kept hold of, while England is the one that moved on and changed. Now, this part really matters, so stay with me here, because I do not want anyone walking away from this video with the wrong idea lodged in their head. None of this means American English is pure. It does not mean it is some untouched, perfect, frozen version of Shakespeare's English, sealed in glass. That is a myth too. And it is just as wrong as the first one. And if you go around repeating it, you will be every bit as mistaken as the people who think Britain kept the original. Because American English changed plenty. It changed enormously. It invented thousands of brand new words of its own. It soaked up sounds and vocabulary from Spanish, from German, from Dutch, from dozens of indigenous languages, from wave after wave after wave of immigrants arriving over 400 years, every single group leaving their fingerprints on the way the country spoke. The American accent you hear today is absolutely not some frozen Elizabethan time capsule. Nobody walking around America right now actually sounds like a person from 1600, not even slightly. If you genuinely met someone from Shakespeare's London tomorrow, a modern Brit and a modern American would both struggle just as much to understand a word they were saying. So if neither one is the untouched original, then what on earth is actually going on here? What is the real answer? Here is the honest version. The version an actual linguist would sit you down and give you. There is no single, perfect, original English sitting frozen in a glass case somewhere, where one side lovingly protected it and the other side betrayed it. That is a fairy tale. That is just not how any of this works. Both of these accents grew out of the very same root, that same rough R rolling English of the 1600s. And both of them have been drifting and shifting and changing every single day for 400 years. They just drifted in different directions, and they kept different souvenirs along the way. England held onto some old things and modernized others. America held onto a different set of old things and modernized others. It is not a straight race with a winner at one end and a loser at the other. It is two branches growing off the exact same tree, and both branches kept right on growing, and neither one of them ever stopped. But here is the part that flips the whole question on its head. If you ask specifically which one of them changed the most in the features people actually argue about, the dropped R, the autumn instead of fall, the abandoned gotten, then the genuinely uncomfortable answer for an enormous number of people is this. On those specific famous points, it is modern British English that has wandered the furthest from how English used to sound. The accent the entire world treats as the correct one, the proper one, the posh and educated and original one, is, on those exact features, the one that has traveled the furthest distance away from home. And honestly, that is kind of beautiful when you sit with it for a second. The thing every single one of us has been quietly trained to hear as the gold standard. That posh British voice. The accent that sounds like authority itself, like intelligence, like old money, like the simply correct way of doing things. It did not earn that crown by staying loyal to the original. It earned it by being the newest, trendiest, most fashionable way to talk in the drawing rooms of London in the 1800s. The prestige was the disguise. The poshness was the costume. It was never the original at all. It just learned brilliantly how to sound exactly like it was. So the next time you hear somebody confidently declare that Americans butcher the English language, that they have wrecked it, that they speak some lesser, broken version of the real thing, you will know the truth. On half the things they are being mocked for, the Americans are the museum, and the British, for all the poshness and all the pride, are the renovation. One quick question before you go, because I actually do want to know what you think. Whose accent do you reckon has drifted the most over the centuries? And which one would you genuinely want to hear Shakespeare's plays performed in, the way he would have actually heard them himself? Drop it in the comments. I read them. And if your surname happens to be English or Scottish or Irish or Welsh, put that down as well, because every one of those names carries its own little accent story, and I love digging into them. And if this video rewired something in your head, even just a little bit, there's a whole channel of exactly this sitting here waiting for you. Go and pick another one. I will see you in the next.